Hello, welcome back to the Data Privacy Lawyer. It's Funmi, the principal attorney speaking. Today's review, we're going to be looking at Pepsi's cookie notice. So I basically am doing a series on the channel. We're going to be looking at the cookie policies and notices that are provided by organizations based on how they utilize cookies. So we can see here that this is very interesting. So we have Pepsi-Cola Bottling Company of New York. They've got a privacy and cookie notice. And it looks like the name of the company is Honickman Companies. Ideally, I'd like to look at Pepsi itself. I would be interested in whether or not this is a subsidiary or an affiliate of Pepsi. I really want to look at Pepsi itself. But it may be that their parent company is that Honickman Companies. So the reason I've gone back is because the obligations that a company like Pepsi would have based on how they're structured from a legal entity perspective is also another question that I generally ask my clients. Now, Pepsi's not my client. We're just looking at companies in general. One of the questions I have on my intake form is, how are you structured from a legal basis? That's going to influence your obligations. So there's two bits of terminology that we're not going to go too much into detail about. It's called controller and processor. Your obligations under the data protection laws are going to vary depending on whether your organization is a controller of the personal data or is a processor of the personal data. I think it's interesting that when we searched on Google Pepsi cookie notice that we were presented with the bottling company. I don't know the affiliation between PepsiCo and that other organization, but the types of advice that I would give to an organization that has lots of different legal entities is also going to vary, and the representations that a company would place on its website will be determined based on how it's legally structured. I mean, that's very influential as well. Okay, so we've got the cookie banner. Let's manage our preferences. I think we can talk about the privacy policy or notice, and we can also talk about cookies too. Sometimes on a privacy policy, you'll also see information related to cookies, and that's because cookies are considered personal data because they can identify as an individual. So we've actually had the opportunity to opt in. I just clicked this because I wanted to see if it was clear when you're opted into the advertising cookies. They're going to stay off, and I always have them off, but basically this is considered a preference center. And I just scroll to the bottom. It's powered by Securiti, and what this means for consumers is the consent management platform that PepsiCo is utilizing is Securiti. Securiti will manage all of the consents that consumers provide Pepsi in order to process these cookies, advertising, analytics, and performance. And if your company is looking for a consent management platform, there's different factors that you might need to take into consideration. If you're looking at what considerations those might be, take a look at my description below, and I would love to help your organization. We're not going to go into detail during this review, but there's consent management platforms that facilitate managing consents given by consumers as they interact with your company's website. And there's lots of these different vendors available. I'm going to save my changes, and then we're going to take a look at the notice. So there's different types of identifiers that Pepsi is collecting. I actually want this particular review to focus on the cookie section, so let's go there. We collect information from you passively. We use tracking tools like browser cookies and mobile device ads. We do this on our websites, in emails that we send to you, and in media advertising. We collect information about usage and browser information over time. We may have third parties collect personal information this way. We also collect information about you from our mobile apps. So they've listed the what's in scope in terms of collecting the cookies. They've listed the platforms on which they collect these cookies. And then we were also presented with that preference center that allowed us to manage, the analytical cookies and the advertising cookies too. I want to see if Pepsi has an exclusive. Okay, about our ads. You can control cookies and tracking technologies, learn how we manage cookies and our vendors who use cookies, and read about it here. So actually, let's do that. We collect personal information about users over time and across different websites. We also work with third parties that collect personal information this way. These third parties may have tools that they place on our sites. Our vendors may also use these tools. In this policy, we and us refers to both PepsiCo and our vendors. Interesting. Okay, I want to see if there was a date this was last updated. There is not. Let's keep going. We use several common tracking tools. These may include browser cookies. We may also use web beacons, flash cookies, and similar technologies. We use these tracking tools to recognize new or past customers, to store your password, to improve our website, to serve you with interest-based or target advertising. So the reason this portion is very important is because that preference center that's managed or powered by Securiti should align with the use of the tracking tools that are placed on this particular policy about our ads. And I use the word policy because that's what Pepsi has referred to this webpage as. But ultimately, if you're telling your consumers as an organization that you're using cookies for these purposes, you need to make sure that you also allow them the opportunity to manage their preferences as it pertains to these tracking tools, because the information that you're obtaining when you serve them with interest-based or targeted advertising, those different identifiers constitute personal data. You can control certain tracking tools, which is what we did using the consent management platform that's powered by Securiti. Your browser may give you the ability to control cookies. How you do so depends on the type of cookie. Certain browsers can be set to reject browser cookies. To control flash cookies, which we may use on certain websites from time to time, you can go here. Okay, interesting. Let's go back. You can opt out of some interest-based behavioral advertising. The Self-Regulatory Program for Online Behavioral Advertising program provides consumers with the ability to opt out of having their online behavior recorded and used for advertising purposes. Now, the reason I've gone through and read through each provision is it appears that this particular webpage is exclusively talking about ads, okay? That was the title. And then each provision talks about ads. What's interesting is that they've also talked about improvements to the websites. I think this webpage is not clear if this is addressing all the cookies or just cookies associated with interest-based advertising and all of the advertising that can be conducted based on the advertising cookies, as opposed to all the cookies that we originally saw in the preference center. It would be good to have some insight into that. I'm going to go back to the privacy notice and see if there's more insights about the other cookies that we saw when we originally clicked on the PepsiCo website. And it may be, again, this is a short review. I don't have insights into every public-facing document by PepsiCo, and that may be provided on an alternate webpage. These reviews are basically just giving a very broad oversight based on what us as consumers see from companies that we regularly use and consume goods of. I just want to give insight to businesses on what may be required, but generally for different organizations in the United States, it is likely when a gap analysis is done for other companies that they have to provide every single web page that is associated with how they use personal data. And that is not something that we do on this channel. We don't look at every single link. That would be impossible to do in a 10-minute review. But I still think it's useful for companies to see that every provision that you write on your site matters. That's the overarching message that I want organizations to know. There's not a lot on the privacy policy about cookies. I'm going to scroll to the bottom and see if there is a specific cookie notice. Maybe there is. Okay, they have the preference center, but not really information about the cookies in particular outside of some generic information. All right, well, I really hope you enjoyed this short review. If I do find in the future that Pepsi has a specific cookie notice, then I will do an alternate review of that specific cookie notice. But I still think it's useful to see how Pepsi utilizes or implements its obligations under the privacy laws, and then looking at their external facing documents to see what type of insights they provide to their consumers. I hope you enjoyed this review. I'll see you in another.